fighting the shadow economy, transparency, whitening the economy. In 2019, Azerbaijan's tax system entered a qualitatively new phase of reforms. Guided by the mentioned key principles, the government decided to carry out fiscal functions along with the legalization of the labor market.
One challenging issue facing many countries is how to formalize workers into the tax system. It's a classic economic puzzle. Governments want to increase tax revenues and provide better protections for workers, but the costs of compliance can be a major barrier for small businesses and individuals. Many businesses choose to stay in the informal economy to avoid the hassle and expense as a result. But there's an intriguing success story coming out of Azerbaijan that's worth examining. Since implementing reforms in 2019, they've seen a significant increase in formal labor contracts. The government simplified procedures and offered incentives to make it easier and less costly for businesses to formalize.
In order to change the current situation in the labor market initially, it was necessary to legalize jobs and whitewash the salaries paid to employees. We have decided to regulate this process by ensuring business interests and utilizing real incentive mechanisms. As a result of the discussions, we focused on tax incentive mechanisms. In 2019, tax incentives were granted to the private sector of the non-oil industry regarding the income tax. The income tax on salaries up to 8,000 manats has been set to zero for a period of 7 years, discouraging employers from hiding employment relationship with their employees or officially recording lower salary amounts. Despite the loss of certain revenues for the budget, the long-term fiscal outcomes projected significant prospects. Thus, today we can take a look at the past period and evaluate the initial results for these incentives. We assess these based on 5 main indicators. These include the increase in the number of employment contracts in the labor market, the wage fund and social contributions, the reduction of budget allocations to social funds, and finally, the growth in business-to-business and business-to-consumer operations in the non-oil sector. We conduct evaluations and relevant analysis for each of these indicators.
The results have been impressive, with 451,000 new labor contracts registered, according to government figures, an increase of 32% compared to 2019. What's more, the vast majority of these new labor contracts came from the private non-oil sector, where contracts grew by nearly 80%. These gains were made across different sectors of the economy, with large gains in formalization of the trade sector, adding 130,000 contracts alone, as well as in agriculture, which grew by 95%, and industry grew by 50%. Private non-oil labor contracts now exceed public contracts in total labor contracts.
Before the reform, the private sector's share in total employment contracts was 37%, while now we have reached a rate above 52%, with the private sector surpassing the public sector. Looking at the indicators related to the formalization of the wage fund, the total wage fund increased by 2.3 times in 2023 compared to 2018, including 2.4 time increase in the private sector of the non-oil industry. This is not the only accomplishment. The formalization of jobs and whitening the wage fund play a pivotal role in fiscal revenues as one of the main transparency indicators. In Azerbaijan, tax authorities are the main operator for collecting not only taxes, but also mandatory state social insurance contributions, unemployment insurance premiums, and mandatory health insurance premiums. Therefore, the legalization of wage fund has also acted as a major catalyst in boosting payments for other social contributions. The amount of income in our main fund, which pays pensions and allowances to our elderly citizens, increased by 2.2 times in 2023 compared to 2018. These additional revenues have provided our government with opportunities to expand the funding sources of the social protection system.
The tax reforms have expanded social protections for workers and boosted tax revenues. During the last 5 years, the State Tax Service collected 2.2 times more funds for the state budget. Prior to reforms, by not collecting sufficient contributions to pay for pensions, the government had to subsidize pensions through the state budget. But now, by increasing the number of formalized contracts and contributions, we see a reduction in the state contributions to pensions. Of course, challenges remain with little over a year before the tax withholding is set to expire, showing that tax reform in Azerbaijan is still a work in progress. But Azerbaijan's experience shows that with the right policy mix, it is possible to make meaningful progress on formalization. Other countries facing similar issues would do well to study Azerbaijan's approach as a potential model.